Graber is with us today. Maria grew up on a small farm with goats, rabbits, chickens, cats, and dogs, but her love was horses. She lives on a 11.7 acre farm called CG Heartbeats Farm in northern Indiana with her husband and her well-loved animals. In 2016, Maria purchased her first Swedish flower hen chicks and her homesteading journey began. And by August of 2017, she launched her website where she started to share lessons and heartaches of homesteading while dealing with chronic illness. So welcome, Maria.
Thank you. I am happy to be here today and chat with your audience.
Well, thanks. I'm so glad to have you. I was talking to a friend earlier and she mentioned she's getting chickens soon. And I'm like, I'm interviewing someone you got to listen to. So it's timely. So tell us just a little bit more about you that we didn't hear, like where you grew up and what kinds of things you did with horses and things like that.
Okay. I grew up in southern Michigan and we lived on a dirt road. It's paved now, but we lived on a dirt road. And life was simple, slow in the summertime. I spent a lot of time outside as a child and a lot of time taking care of animals. I I think we got our first pony when I was 11. But we saved money for 4 years, me and a sister, to buy that pony. We spent $125, which doesn't seem like that much money now, but back at that point and where we were in life, it was a lot of money to save up.
Absolutely.
I've had horses ever since. I still have them, even though I'm not riding actively or showing or competing anymore. My focus after 4-H or even in 4-H was barrel racing. And then I did a little bit of team roping. And I worked 5 years at a breeding and foaling barn owned by veterinarians in northern Indiana, and did a lot with foaling out the mares. And I worked in the barn during the day cleaning stalls or whatever stuff they needed me to help with. And then at night I would stay and watch the mares. And I really, really enjoyed that, but it was exhausting.
I bet.
I don't know that I could carry that heavy of a schedule anymore at this point in my life. So,
well, that's fascinating about the horses and the foaling of all of that. So, but today we're going to talk about chickens, which are a little simpler, I would imagine, than horses.
Yes and no. My biggest struggle with the chickens is I had all this background knowledge of horses. If something went wrong, I don't need to call a vet every time something goes wrong because I have experience with dealing with a lot of that different illnesses or struggles that they can have. I do need to call a veterinarian sometimes. It's not that I never do, but with chickens, I knew nothing. And so it's really been different to learn to take care of them when I have like no background knowledge. And I learned that, at least through my experience with chickens, they can offer a symptom of something, and it's not really a guaranteed indication of what's actually wrong with them. Like something like where they may not correctly use one of their legs, that can indicate a variety of problems or diseases or struggles with their health. And so it doesn't necessarily mean, okay, they're doing this, so this is wrong with them. And where with horses, maybe it's because I have more experience with that, it's easier for me to understand what's going on when I see something isn't right. And I don't always know with horses, but maybe just, 30 plus years with horses versus 5 years with chickens. And I feel like I'm still kind of a newbie when it in comparison.
Right.
But then, that's 5 years versus 30 some years. So there's that difference in experience.
Yes, that's interesting. So you live on 11 acres, which sounds like a really cool place to live. But what animals besides chickens do you have on your farm right now?
I have a blue heeler that he is probably 10 or 11. I raised him. He was my stepson's dog. But then as he grew older and moved on, the dog stayed with us. And then I have a Great Pyrenees that just turned 1 on the 18th last week. And or that's last week as we're interviewing.
You're right.
That's been a big learning curve because the healers are strong-minded and so are the Pyrenees. And in that they're alike. And I've had I've had blue healers for a lot of years, maybe 20 or 30, probably over 20 years. Yeah, over 20 years that I've had blue healers. Or the Pyrenees, they're both strong-minded dogs, but the blue healer is a herd dog to, direct animals where to go. The Great Pyrenees is a protector. And so how they go about their jobs is very, very different. And it's been a learning curve for me because even though I read as much as I could about the Great Pyrenees as I got a puppy, there's things that you just learn with experience. And maybe you don't see it quite the way it's written. She's a good dog. They're very smart, sweet, and kind, really. But a puppy's a puppy. And
right.
I have a quick story if we have time.
Sure.
I have her in the barn at night because it's been so cold in a crate, and then she's outside on a chain during the day because we don't have the fences up. And she's at an age now where I cannot let her run on 11 acres. She sees a deer and she's off the property. So getting the fence up is a work in process. She was in the barn last night, and I went in the barn and I seen that I had a box of jars out there, and I seen that looked different than it did last night. And I noticed that the top part of a chicken water that I was very tired last night. I left it on the floor. I seen it wasn't where I'd left it. And I was like, uh-oh, what happened in here? And I continued walking, and she greeted me. She had made it out of her kennel. Oh. But she's a puppy, so she's going to chew on things. That's part of it. And she was not as hyper and hadn't tore up as much as like a few months ago. She got out of her crate and she was in the barn. But I thought, well, there was no possums or coons in here causing any problems last night. This I know.
That's good.
I've not seen too many since then. So that's the Great Pyrenees. I have 5 horses. 2 of them I raised from foals. One of them my sister had as a foal, but the 2 I raised from foals are over 20, and one of them is kind of struggling with her health. But she's the one that I competed on a lot and stuff. So she's very special. She's not hurting. She just doesn't look quite as good as I would like her to look. Yeah. And the 5 horses. I have a lot of cats, probably more than I should have. Note too, if I could go back and do something different. When I tamed the feral cat, it took me 8 weeks to touch her, but I would have gotten her fixed quicker because I'm just playing catch up constantly to keep cats fixed as they're born. And like animals in the wild, possums or coons or deer or coyote, there is a natural selection process that happens, which is, if you love your domestic animals, it's not really a joy to see that happen. And so I do continue to strive to get them fixed. So that cuts back. Could be a whole nother episode.
Right.
And then let's see. Yeah, the dogs. And I'm hoping by the time this airs, I will have Nigerian dwarf goats. I have been shopping for them. And I originally wanted cattle. I want my own milk as a part of my homesteading. And I grew up with goats. I don't care for the Tog goat milk taste, which is the breed that my dad has. And I tasted some Nigerian dwarf goat milk, and it's delicious. It has of the goaty flavor that you find in a lot of goat milk. And so they're little. I have 11 acres, not 100. And it's harder to have cattle, very many cattle, with only 11 acres, being that part of it's woods. About half of the acreage is woods. And so it's, I already have the horses on some pasture. So Nigerian dwarfs it is for now. And I may get one day. I haven't given that up, but it's been 5 years of wanting a cow. And so I'm like, okay, well, the point is to have my own milk. So a goat will work.
Good starting point. And that's a good segue, because even though we're going to talk more about chickens, I wanted to just back up a little bit and spend a minute talking about homesteading. What is that exactly? How would you define that?
I think each person that homesteads has a little bit of their own definition of what that is to them. And that question intrigues me of what homesteading is to different people, because it's not all exactly the same thing. So if you're asking, what it is to me, it's the ability to produce my own food, to be somewhat self-sufficient in producing my own food, but in producing other products that you might use in life. And I am nowhere near what my long-term goals are. I've made progress. It has to do with, as you talk about producing your own food, that could be meat, that could be eggs, that could be milk, that can be vegetables, the canning process. And it was only 2 years ago that I started canning again. So if we go back 20 plus years, in my early 20s, I canned then. I grew up helping my grandma can, eating canned food. And there is a huge difference in the flavor between what you find in the store and what you home can and process. So that's all a beginning journey there. I'm not canning all of my own food, and I've started raising gardens. A struggle that I came across when I wanted to start having a garden was we have this phenomenal root system, grass with a phenomenal root system. And so getting that sod broken up is physically difficult if you don't have the proper tools to do that. So I used my chickens, and I set up like dog kennel panels, put my chickens on that ground to kill the sod off. And so every year I have more ground space, because a couple times a year I move those pens around to create more garden ground.
Well, that's brilliant.
So my journey of garden space is growing, and then I'm under my breath mowing lawn, going, I'm mowing too much lawn. I can't wait until we get more of this put to use.
So right now you're growing vegetables, you're getting eggs. Do you use any of the chickens as fryers, or are they all layers?
Oh, my chickens. Yes, they're all three breeds are Swedish flower hens, Lemmenkaku Niederheiner, and Silver Gray Dorking. They are all heritage breeds. So they're slower to develop than what your fryers would be.
Okay.
And they're not as steady of layers as you're laying, let's see. There's a laying breed, the red, and then there's also a white one, and I'm sorry that I don't have those names on the tip. But they're your common layer breeds that you would find at like the supply store and that kind of thing. Where these are heritage, they may lay longer, but maybe not as many eggs in a year.
Okay.
And then the Silver Gray Dorkings is more of a meat bird, and it was used to create the modern meat bird, one of many. And since the modern meat birds that are out there, that they're ready to butcher in 3 to maybe 2 months to 3 months, I think, and you need to, or their hearts get so big that they cannot continue living.
Right.
And so, but the Silver Gray Dorking, you're probably still going to wait 5 months or longer until you're ready to butcher those. They lay eggs. Their eggs are smaller.
Okay.
The other two breeds do lay a pretty good 2 ounces or larger once they're out of their pullet stage.
So one summer, the kids and I had an opportunity to help raise chickens for the intention of butchering them and having meat. And it was a fascinating experience, and it was an interesting process. And I was never more grateful to pay 79 cents a pound at the grocery store as I was, because it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. I think that the value in it it's different than the cost of meat per se, because the value in it, is knowing where your food came from. It's not injected with something to make it more plump. It just is food in its natural form. And maybe that's where the value lies versus the actual money cost, because you're right. It is a lot of work to have your own eggs, to have your own meat. That's not, and you don't always, the feed is not cheap to buy to feed them, especially, where the meat birds might be ready in 2 to 3 months. The heritage are 5. Well, then you've got 2 to 3 more months of feeding them. So there's more cost. And I'm still working on what feed I can grow for them to help offset the cost of the feed for them, because it takes away from any income that I do produce with them when I'm spending so much on feed. So that's where I'm at. And that's kind of where I've been at. I grew flax last year, and chickens like flax.
Okay.
So one of the things I want to do this year is actually have a flax plot and not just a row in the garden and grow more. But
Wonderful. So when you bought your first chicken in 2016, was it with the intention of building up a big flock and having, a whole bunch of chickens laying eggs?
well, there's this thing called chicken math. So if you're not familiar with what that is, it's the rapid way that your flock multiplies and your desire to have more. Swedish flower hens was the first breed that I had purchased, and they're unique in their coloring. They have white tips on the end of their feathers, but the color variations within that breed, it just like this year I hatched some chicks. Oh, I didn't hatch that color yet. I think I'm going to keep this one. And so it's and then the way my pens are set up, I set them up by breeding lines. People set them up differently. There's not a right or wrong. And so I may have like a pen that has like some of my original pens, hens from one farm, a rooster from another farm to keep the diversity there. Like that's my approach to it. And then I'll take the offspring from one group, one pen, and pair it with an offspring from another pen. And I keep adding pens. And this year I really need to move on some of my older pens because, make sure I have what I want from them and move them on and continue. And that's part of the breeding program that I've always had an interest in genetics. And if it's horses, if it's cows, if it's goats, and if it's chickens, like that fascinates me. And studying it and watching the different characteristics come through the generations. In horses, you can go back and look at your great grands of a particular horse. And being that I've worked on farms and seen, been able to have the opportunity to see not just pictures, but see certain traits come down through the lines. And that fascinates me. I can sit and spend hours on it. And then, you actually have to go do chores. So,
right. So you do breed. I mean, I know that you sell hatching eggs to people who want to start or expand what they're doing. And so you've breeded these and you calculate how many eggs you need to have for that you'll keep and that you'll sell and that you'll eat. And you've got all that figured out. But how did you jump from your first chicken to saying, I'm going to teach people how to get going with this and sell things to them?
I've always had a passion for like when I was around goats, I had a passion for the kidding when they were having babies. And then as I get into horses, I was very interested in foaling mares out. And I did a class for 2 years at a career center in high school. And there I got to help a pig have her babies. Mm-hmm. And I've been present for cows being birthed, but I've never actually had to assist. But I just have this passion for that. And same thing with hatching baby chicks. It intrigues me, the process, the miracle they develop, from what you might throw in a frying pan. And then you get this live baby chick that grows up into a chicken. I mean, that's so beautiful. And if I may, credit the Lord's creativity and his creation to establish this process from the beginning of the world. To me, that's beautiful.
It's miraculous.
It is. Yeah. And then to witness that, which it's not always pretty. I've helped goats that the kids were dead. I've helped goats that the doe died. I've lost chicks. I've got one now that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it to help it make it. And so there's hard moments. It's not always joy. But it's part of it, and I wouldn't trade it. Even though some days I say, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what's the furthest you've ever shipped any of your eggs to? How far of a reach do you have?
Down south, I think. I mean, it's always been within the country because there's regulations in place for shipping out of the country.
Okay.
I have taken birds that not eggs, but actually taken like birds that were maybe 2 to 3 months old to Wyoming.
Oh.
But that's been a trip that was already happening. So they just traveled with me because shipping is hard on them. The post office workers are human too, and nobody's perfect, and so there's a risk when you're shipping them. I've shipped a few chicks. The farm is NPIP certified, which is a natural poultry improvement program. And most states require that for shipping or for moving chickens from one state to another. I'm also a certified tester, and so that I can test farms in Indiana.
Okay. So what does that involve?
Um, you take a sample of blood and mix it with an antigen, and then you give it 2 minutes and you look for what that looks like as you mixed it.
Okay. So you're kind of checking to make sure that the breeds are healthy and
you're
okay.
Specifically looking for Florium typhoid. And there's other diseases that chickens can have. Some states require avian influenza is one that states require your herd or your flock to be tested free. I have not taken the steps to have my herd tested. My flock. I'm going from horses to chickens, and so I may do that this year because I've had interest from people in states that require AI testing, and there's an expense that's involved in testing, having your flock tested, and so I may take the steps to have that done because I've had some interest in that, and I haven't been tested before. So
okay, well, that's interesting. So okay, what is the scoop with where you store your eggs? Because obviously when I go to the store, I buy them in the refrigerated section and I keep them in my refrigerator, but I have heard that you can keep them on the counter and they should last a long time. So what is the scoop and why do we refrigerate them?
Okay. You can keep them out. Farm fresh eggs, like I don't say that you have to refrigerate them, but there are certain governmental regulations out there, and I like to follow those. I sometimes sell at farmers markets.
Okay.
For the farmers markets in Indiana, you're supposed to wash your eggs. And so if I wash the eggs, they go in the refrigerator.
Okay.
Hens produce a bloom. It's when a hen lays an egg, it's kind of wet. And that's a coating that goes over the egg, and it actually helps to protect it. I've heard people talk about all kinds of different things about how long the eggs last on the counter and how long you can eat them. I haven't specifically sat down and tested them. I try to eat them within 4 to 5 weeks or pass them on to someone else. My biggest goal is to produce hatching eggs and chicks.
Okay.
And but I'm always going to have extra eggs. Maybe I know that a certain pen hasn't been producing fertile eggs, so and I can only eat so many eggs a day. So
right, yes. And so you mentioned possums and raccoons earlier in the conversation, but do you have predators? Is this whole image of the fox in the hen house, is that kind of true? Do you have to watch out for certain animals, or is that over exaggerated?
No, chickens are an animal of prey. They're not a predator. They're an animal of prey, and it's definitely a concern. I am blessed with a 60 by 30 old chicken barn, and I have set up other pens in it. So it was structured to keep predators out. So it's somewhat safe. I've had coons and possums come in there before. I had a skunk in there once.
I'm partial to skunks. I like those. So
I won't tell you what happened to them. And that's another thing. I'm kind of, but we're talking about predators. I am a nurturer by heart. I am not a hunter, and I'm not a killer. And every time I have to eliminate a predator, it makes me sad. It's never an enjoyable process. And but yes, we also have cats, and the cats have cat food, and that's a draw to possums, especially coons. But since we have a netta here, I don't think they're around as much, and I certainly don't see them very often like I did. So yeah, it makes me happy too, because if they live in the woods, good for them.
Right. Yes. Stay there.
However, last year, I think most people are familiar with like the wire dog pens and kennels that,
Hmm.
you might have them in your house or whatever. They make different sizes of them. And sometimes I use them for some of the chickens. They're not all in them, and they're not all in them all the time. Last year, some kind of critter started being able to reach in and get them out of there.
Oh,
I used to have them out, 24 hours a day in that little dog kennel. And I'd have several of them like sitting up next to each other or whatever. And then sometimes during the day, I'd let them out to free range and then put them back in there at night. And then I even had them, our one barn is really open. It needs a lot of work. It's an old barn and it needs work. But I had some of them set up in there. And some animal had gone in there last year over the summertime and into late fall and actually like killed some that were in there.
oh,
Never caught what did that. It may have been a coyote because it's certainly open enough that a coyote could get in there. And but I haven't had much of that in the main chicken barn. And so it just changes how I keep them. And then outside, hawks are a problem to fly down.
oh,
I would say the Swedish flower hens, once they've been outside enough to realize where the hiding spots are, they're pretty good about paying attention. The roosters will watch and sound an alarm, and they will go hide if
mm.
a bird comes around. I haven't had a lot of death by the birds, and I could keep talking. So if I'm telling too many stories, you can let me know.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because, I grew up in the city, but, I've lived in neighborhoods that are open and have animals. And right now, the neighborhood we're in is situated in a prairie. So there's coyotes and owls and different things that come through. But I just think it's fascinating to know what, it's all natural, but what do you want to prevent and what do you want to encourage? And so I love hearing this. But if a mom is listening now and is thinking, well, this is fascinating, I'd love to start doing something with chickens, even just backyard chickens, because I know that's something that a lot of people in our area, our suburban area, even like to do. What is something she should do first before she even gets a chicken? What should she do to see if this is something that is a good fit?
You probably can get by with feeding them once a day. You probably don't have to feed them twice a day. So time, it wouldn't be a twice a day undertaking. And deciding what breed that works for her goals would be probably the number one thing. But time, what if you go on vacation? What if you want to go do that's also right up there to understand, finding somebody to maybe come by and feed the chickens if you're gone or check on them.
Mm-hmm.
But deciding what breed works, because there's over 100 breeds, maybe way more than that you can choose from. They're not all readily available. Mm-hmm. Some of them, I think another thing to consider is as far as what goals a mom would have for their chickens. Are her kids going to show them in 4-H? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be that she just wants her own eggs? Does she want to hatch eggs? Does she want a rooster? Can she have a rooster where she's at? Mm-hmm. If a mom does not want a rooster, there are some breeds that can be sexed, male or female, at right after hatching. Mm-hmm. Others you have to wait until they're older. And so, maybe it's not chicks that you want to buy first. Maybe you want to buy pullets, which, 2 to 3 months old. It's like the heritage breeds, they don't start laying until they're about maybe 4.5, but usually 5 or 6 months old. So there is, so do you want pullets? Do you want baby chicks? That's a decision to make. There is something to be said for raising the chicks from babies. You get to hold them, to get to know them. They become more of a pet than when you get the older birds. But you can still learn to know them. I mean, it's not, but with children, there's something special about having baby chicks and raising them.
Yeah.
Kind of place you need to keep them to grow them until they're older. You're going to need a different setup for chicks than you are for pullets. So they need heat on them. They need to be secure from predators at any age. If you're keeping them outside, we talked about predators a little bit ago. And if I can go back to that, digging if you're going to have chickens for a while outside, and digging them a trench and putting a fence down
Mm,
to keep animals from digging under is helpful. And then, they don't have to be super warm if there's snow where they're at. They just need protection from the wind, and
okay.
um, feed and warm bedding and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So is this the kind of stuff that you teach people to do, that you can help people get started with?
Right now, I am focusing on teaching people about hatching chickens.
Okay.
And so that's kind of been my focus, I guess, in part because that's where my passion's at. I'm not
Mhm.
sure that's where my audience is at, but that's where my passion's at, is the new life. And so I am, yeah, that's my focus right now, is to teach
Okay.
people to hatch chicks. Um, but if anybody emails me or reaches out on social media and asks me a question or has a question, I'm happy to answer that. And
Okay.
I enjoy hearing what questions people have, because
Mhm.
with my background, I don't always know exactly what somebody wants to know about. So I appreciate those questions.
Sure, because what's intuitive to you, because you grew up doing it, is new to somebody else, and it's hard to always see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to set my niece up in another state to hatch her own. They have chickens, but to set her up to hatch her own chicks. And she was asking me some questions as I was talking to her, and it was like the things that she didn't know at 12 years old that was just common to me. And she wanted to know what humidity was.
Oh,
She hasn't
interesting.
learned that yet. And to me, that's been, especially in our warm Indiana summers, like humidity is like, how do she doesn't live in Indiana. She doesn't deal with that.
Right?
Yeah. So it's always good to hear what people's questions are.
Yeah, that's always helpful. Well, our time is running to a close. It's gone fast. This has been a great conversation. And one final question that I ask every guest as we wrap up, it's a little more lighthearted. But what is your favorite gadget?
That is a little bit, I don't do a lot of gadgets. So it's a bit challenging for me to, I suppose, because I have an online side of my homesteading journey and business.
Mhm.
Probably my smartphone and my laptop are the two that I use, and I'm not sure if that fits under a gadget. I don't use a lot of electronics. That's
Okay. What's your favorite chicken tool? What's the one thing that you're like, this made my life so much easier. I could never live without it.
Well, if you're raising chickens, you need a heat source in the wintertime, heat lamps, but they're scary because they can cause fires. I don't know if that's my favorite. I'm processing this question.
Yeah.
Um, my I have a chicken water style that I really like.
Okay.
Uh, the ice in the wintertime comes out of it. I have a lot of chicken pens, so I can't take heat to every single pen to keep the water from freezing.
Right.
It, there's a certain style of chicken water that the ice comes out of easier, and that they twist apart easier. And then you can also, when you put the lid on, you can guarantee that it's going to be on right, because the tabs show up on the bottom. And
Perfect.
I wrote a blog post about it to share like why I like it. And yeah, so I'd have to say that, especially coming out of winter, that has been my favorite one lately.
Well, that's a great one, because it's a different world. Gadgets don't mean the same to everybody. So my gadgets some are kitchen tools, but whatever makes life easier, I'm all for it. So
All
we'll be
right.
sure to post a link to that blog post in the show notes as well, so people can see that. But Maria, how can people connect with you?
I have a website at www.don'tclipmywings.com.
It's great.
I am on Instagram at Country Girl Heartbeats Farm. And I have a Facebook farm page at Country Girl Heartbeats Farm. And I'm also on Facebook as Maria Graber. And I am on LinkedIn, Maria Graber. I'm not on that platform as much. I have a Twitter account, CG Heartbeats Farm. I'm not on that platform as much. and a YouTube channel, Country Girl Heartbeats, or CG Heartbeats Farm. CG Heartbeats
Excellent.
Farm on YouTube, and I do post there regularly.
Oh, good, good. That'll be a very helpful resource. And you do have an offer to share with our moms that are listening today, a hatching checklist. Do you want to tell us about that really briefly?
Yes, it is all inclusive, from picking out your incubator to how to take care of your chicks afterwards, after you've hatched them. It doesn't just talk about the hatching projects process, and it is a checklist with a few spaces for notes. It takes you all the way through, like I said, from the beginning to the end of the hatching process. There may be parts that apply to some people and parts that that don't, but it's all inclusive for somebody that possibly has never done this before.
Wonderful.
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you so much for being with us today. It was fascinating. I learned a lot about chickens, and I will look forward to hearing how other moms engage with you as they pursue their chicken interest as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was great to chat today.